Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, number 47's done it again, but I think this time he may have met his Waterloo. He issued another executive order. This one came out Thursday evening, now at about, I would say 8 hours ago, and it states that the president is concerned about to maintain Washington a beautiful state, and to do this, there must be the appropriate controls on crime, and yes, even illegal aliens, and so on. In his executive order, he calls for this Washington D.C. Beautification Task Force. That's the idea. The Washington D.C. Beautification Task Force, and it's charged with the ability to get all of these different federal government departments together in one room and sit down and plan for beautification of DC, different execution of different uh, initiatives and um, plans moving forward. But there's a big problem with this 9,000 word executive order. It doesn't have a funding mechanism attached to it. Nowhere in the executive order, which is at zinniReport.com, is a funding source mentioned. And then guess what? The president doesn't have the direct control of the purse to be able to direct spending to be had just willy-nilly from any source that he doesn't have a preliminary control over. The Congress has control of the purse, not the president. In fact, let's take a look at something that happened in 2020. Yeah, when Donald Trump was president. And what this was simply had to do with around the pandemic, and it went like this: with Congress in gridlock over a second stimulus bill to provide coronavirus relief, President Donald Trump issued 4 executive actions August 8th, shortly after critics took to social media questioning the action's legality. One of those critics was former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, who tweeted his take on the actions of the day after the news was announced. Quote, "Your reminder that a president cannot spend taxpayer dollars by executive order," unquote. The tweet read. Reich later shared the same post on his Facebook page with a caption, "That's not how this works." Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle criticized Trump's move. Senator Ben Nass, the Nebraska Republican, called the orders unconstitutional slop, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called them illusions that don't even accomplish what he sets out to do. Reich did not respond to USA Today's request for comment here in this article, but the article goes on. It's, as you can see, reads, "The Constitution gives power of the purse to Congress. The U.S. Constitution grants the Congress the country's spending power." David Super, a constitutional law expert teaching at Georgetown University, said that means the president cannot spend money without congressional authorization, whether by executive order or presidential memorandum or anything else. However, Congress can provide money that is contingent on the president releasing it, in which case an executive order could release funds if that's what Congress called for. So Congress could pass a law saying, give this money to the farmers in Iowa, in which case the farmers get the money. Or Congress could say, give this money to the farmers in Iowa if you find they need it, Super said. In that case, the money wouldn't go out unless or until the president made a finding that was needed through executive order. And if he did make that finding, then it would go out. See? In presidential spending discretion and congressional controls, constitutional expert Louis Fisher breaks down several examples of presidents exercising the power to decide what money goes where with contingency funds, sometimes in ways that weren't appropriated by Congress. In 1961, for example, John F. Kennedy Jr., the president then, issued an executive order establishing the Peace Corps. The agency wasn't appropriated funding until 7 months later, but in the meantime, President Kennedy financed the Corps by using over $1 million in contingency funds from the Mutual Security Act. And it goes on. Congress has moved before to curb abuses of contingency funds by the executive branch. Fisher wrote that in 1959, a subcommittee in the House specifically denied funding for an incentive investment program proposed by the executive administration. That denial was omitted from the final appropriation bill passed by Congress, and the president used his contingency fund to start the program anyway. You see what I'm getting at? He has to have a contingency fund to do this. In the case of the DC beautification, he hasn't pointed to it. He hasn't said, Jack, it's not there. It's very sloppily written. The House Appropriations Committee claimed that the president was using the contingency to override the actions of Congress. So in a later bill, it was written that no funds appropriated for the president's contingency fund shall be used for any project or activity for which an estimate has been submitted to Congress and which estimate has been rejected. Generally, presidents are not allowed to shuffle around contingency funds, Super said. If a president decided he wanted to move money from our imaginary contingency fund for Iowa farmers and give it to Texas health care workers, that wouldn't be allowed. But the lines have been blurred before. It happened recently with the funding for Trump's border wall. Now, in that case, what happened was that Congress and various defense and national security statutes have given the president a fair amount of authority, to shift things around, Super said. There's a fairly broad there's a fair amount of authority to do that, a fairly broad authority, specifically in national security statutes to allow responding to fast-changing war conditions. And Trump used that, a provision to build a border wall. And that's not really a military thing. And that's why there's been litigation around that. I think people have the notion that the president can push things around because of that, that he can do what he wants to when he's king. He's not. John Hudak, senior fellow in government studies at the Brookings Institution, told a fact-checking organization a similar story when addressing the claim that United States presidents can't spend taxpayer money with executive orders. A blanket statement like that is incorrect, he told the organization. It's not typically common that funds are spent at the direction of an executive order, but there's not a blanket prohibition on that behavior. And he says, while none of the executive actions hold much weight, Super said the unemployment memorandum is the one that really matters. And it is the only executive action of the four clearly trying to spend funds in a way Congress has not anticipated or appropriated. The memo allows for states to provide up to $400 a week in expanded unemployment benefits, 75% of which would be moved from the federal government's Federal Disaster Relief Fund, and 25% which is expected to come out of the state's pockets. Although there is partisan debate over the legality of the action, Treasurer Secretary Steve Mnuchin said all four executive actions were vetted by the Office of Legal Counsel. Big wow. If it even if it isn't legal, it's unlikely the actions will be challenged in court, primarily due to the fact that withholding aid in a pandemic is a bad look politically. See, but this is a different story today. We're supposedly post-pandemic by Trump's own actions. Now, it goes on to read, if the Democrats want to challenge us in court, hold up unemployment benefits, those hardworking Americans that are out of a job because of COVID, they're going to have a lot of explaining to Mnuchin until Sunday, Fox News Sunday. All right? So anyway, you get the point. This goes back into a lot of detail. It doesn't really apply today with the direction it's taking, but you get the idea. The bottom line is that the president cannot spend money. Congress can direct the spending of money. The president cannot spend taxpayer money. And so all of the requirements that are called for by this executive order really are moot. And it's a good idea to do a review of all the executive orders that Trump has put out today to see if such mandates of spending are called for. And if they are, then those executive orders should be considered illegal. Subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube and bookmark ZennyReport.com. We'll see you.